Right now, I'm sitting above a motorbike repair shop in Pattaya, slurping cup noodles while staring at a stack of unsold comic sketches. My name's Lionel. I'm 59 years old, and I used to believe love could rewrite your story, give your life a second arc. Then I got the email. It wasn't from her, it was from the bank. The subject line said, "Overdraft notice, joint account." I remember feeling confused more than anything. I hadn't opened a joint account. I didn't even know we had one. My chest got tight. I clicked the attachment. There it was, my name beside hers, a withdrawal trail that bled straight through the last of my savings. Transactions for designer shoes, spa packages, dinner dates, places I'd never been, places I know she went without me. I felt frozen, not angry, just hollow, like I'd been drawn in pencil and someone had started erasing me. I sold my flat. I flew across the world, and I married the girl with the dragon tattoo, a receptionist, with eyes that made me forget every bad thing that ever happened. She looked me in the eye while draining my life savings, and I thanked her for it. If you're watching this, maybe you've got someone like her too. Someone young, magnetic, who makes you feel like you've still got time for a new beginning. Before you leap, listen to this story. Please hit the like button, drop a comment, and let me know where you're watching from. And if you're someone who keeps showing up for these stories, super thank you. Seriously. I see your comments. You make this feel like it matters. Because this isn't just about money. It's about identity, and how one smile can take everything you are and leave you sketching ghosts. Let me take you back to where it all started. I stepped off the plane in Bangkok with nothing but a sketchbook and 30,000 pounds burning a hole in my bank account. My divorce papers were still warm from the solicitor's office, and my flat in Manchester had sold faster than I expected. 58 years old, unemployed, and free for the first time since Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. The heat hit me like a slap, but I smiled anyway. This was my reset button. This was where Lionel Davies would become someone new. The taxi driver spoke broken English and kept asking if I wanted girls. No, I told him. I want to draw. He looked at me like I was mental. Maybe I was. The roads to Pattaya stretched endlessly, motorbikes weaving between cars like angry insects. I pressed my face to the window and watched Thailand blur past. This wasn't a holiday. This was an escape. I found a small guest house near Walking Street and dropped my bags. The room smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams, but it was mine. I unpacked my pencils, my brushes, my hope. Then I walked outside to find inspiration. The streets were chaos. Neon signs blinked in languages I couldn't read. Music pounded from every doorway. And then I saw it. A tattoo shop with dragons painted on the window. Something pulled me toward it. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was stupidity. I pushed the door open and heard the buzz of machines, the hum of art being carved into skin. "You want tattoo?" The voice came from behind the counter. I turned and saw her. 24 years old, long black hair, and a dragon wrapped around her left arm. Her eyes were dark honey, and when she smiled, I forgot every reason I'd come to Thailand. "I'm just looking," I managed to say. "You artist?" she asked, pointing to my sketchbook. "Sort of. Comic books. Used to be, anyway." She laughed, and the sound was like wind chimes. "I'm Gentana." "You want to see my friend's work?" "Very good artist." I nodded, not trusting my voice. She led me to a chair and showed me photos of tattoos, dragons, flowers, Buddhist symbols. Her fingers brushed mine as she turned pages. I felt electricity. I felt alive. "You want tattoo to remember Thailand?" she asked. I looked at her dragon, the way it curved around her arm like it belonged there. "What would you suggest?" "Phoenix," she said without hesitation. "You look like man who need new beginning." I booked the appointment for the next day, not because I wanted a tattoo, but because I wanted to see her again. "You buy me juice after?" she asked as I left. "We talk about your art." I walked back to my guest house with my head spinning. Her laugh echoed in my ears. Her dragon danced behind my eyelids. I opened my sketchbook and started drawing her face from memory. For the first time in months, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt possibility. I showed up at the tattoo shop the next morning with sweaty palms and a racing heart. Gentana was already there, wearing a yellow sundress that made her skin glow. "You ready for Phoenix?" she asked. I nodded and sat in the chair. The artist was her friend Crit, a quiet man with steady hands. As he worked, Gentana sat beside me and talked. "Where you from in England?" she asked. "Manchester, born and raised." "Manchester United?" "I know this team, very famous." I laughed. "Yeah, I'm a City fan, actually. Always backing the underdog." "Like me," she said, and something in her voice made me look at her. "I'm from Eisen, very poor province. Come to Pattaya to work, send money to family." The needle bit into my shoulder, but I barely felt it. I was too focused on her story. My father died when I'm 16. I take care of mother, little brother. Work in restaurant first, then here. Reception only, she added quickly. "I don't get tattoo. I just help customers." "What about Thai men? You don't date them?" She shrugged. "Thai men want young girl with no brain. Want girl to cook, clean, say nothing. I want partner, someone who understand me." The Phoenix took 3 hours. While Crit worked, Gentana told me about her dreams. She wanted to travel, to see Europe, to learn languages. She asked about my comic books, my art, my life back home. I told her about my divorce, how Sarah had left me for her yoga instructor, how I'd spent 23 years drawing superheroes and never feeling like one myself. "You superhero now?" she said, touching the fresh Phoenix on my shoulder. "You fly to Thailand, start new life, very brave." After Crit finished, she kept her promise. We walked to a juice stand and ordered mango smoothies. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. "I show you real Thailand tomorrow," she said. "Not tourist places, real places." I agreed instantly. That night, I drew her again. This time I captured her smile, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. I drew her dragon too, coiling around my Phoenix, two mythical creatures finding each other. The next day she took me to a temple outside the city. We rode on her motorbike, and I held her waist as we weaved through traffic. She smelled like jasmine and possibility. At the temple, she showed me how to pray, how to light incense, how to make wishes. "What you wish for?" she asked. I looked at her standing in the golden light, her hair flowing in the breeze. "I can't tell you, or it won't come true." But the truth was, I was looking at my wish. We ate somtam from a street vendor, sitting on plastic stools like locals. She laughed when I couldn't handle the spice, ordering me more rice with tears in her eyes from giggling so hard. "You funny, Lionel. Different from other farang." "How many other farang have you known?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Her face grew serious. "Few, but they only want one thing. You different. You see me as person, not just Thai girl." That evening we walked along the beach. The waves lapped at our feet, and the moon hung low over the water. She stopped walking and turned to face me. "Lionel," she said, and my name sounded beautiful in her accent. "I like you very much." "I like you too," I whispered. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed me. Her lips tasted like mango and promises. I pulled her close, feeling her heart beat against my chest. "I never meet man like you," she said against my lips. "Kind man, good man, my lucky farang." Walking back to my guest house, her hand in mine, I felt like I was floating. This wasn't just a holiday romance. This was something real, something worth risking everything for. 3 weeks in, Gentana suggested I move out of the guest house. "Waste money," she said, curled against my chest in the narrow bed. "I know nice apartment. We can live together." I'd been thinking the same thing. The guest house was depressing, and I wanted to wake up next to her every morning. Are you sure? I don't want to rush things. She lifted her head and looked at me with those honey eyes. Lionel, I'm 24. I know what I want. You good man, I feel safe with you. The apartment was perfect. 2 bedrooms, a balcony overlooking the city, and rent that wouldn't break my budget. We moved in together the next day. Gentana had very few belongings, just clothes and a small Buddha statue her grandmother had given her. I travel light, she explained. Easy to leave if need to. You won't need to leave, I told her, kissing her forehead. Not if I have anything to say about it. The first month was bliss. I'd wake up and sketch while she made coffee. She'd go to work at the tattoo shop, and I'd explore Pattaya or work on my art. Evenings were ours. We'd eat dinner on the balcony, talk about our days, make love under the ceiling fan. She started posting photos of us on Facebook, calling me her husband in the captions. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but I didn't say anything. Maybe it was just translation. Lionel, she said one evening, I have idea. We should open bank account together. I looked up from my sketchbook. Together? Yes. Make everything easy. I can help you with banking here. You can help me save money. Partnership. It made sense. She knew the language, the system. And if we were building a life together, we should share the financial burden. Okay, I said, we'll go tomorrow. At the bank, she translated everything for me. The account was in both our names, and I transferred £20,000 to get us started. Gentana squeezed my hand when the transaction went through. This is good, Lionel. This is future. But 2 weeks later, something shifted. She became distant, checking her phone constantly, taking calls in Thai and walking to the balcony so I couldn't hear. When I asked about it, she'd shrug and say it was family business. My mother's sick, she said one evening. I need to go Bangkok, visit her. I'll come with you, I offered immediately. Her face flashed with something panic, annoyance. It was gone so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. No, she very traditional. Not ready to meet farang boyfriend yet. Maybe next time. But you called me your husband on Facebook. Just for fun, she said, not meeting my eyes. Thai girls like to dream. She asked for 5,000 baht for the trip. I gave it to her without question. She left the next morning, promising to be back in 3 days. I spent those days alone, sketching and trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my stomach. When she returned, she was different. More affectionate, almost guilty. She brought me a shirt from Bangkok and made my favorite som tam for dinner. How's your mother? I asked. Better now. Money helped buy medicine. But when I looked at the bank statement the next week, I saw she'd withdrawn more than 5,000 baht. Much more. Gentana, the bank statement shows hospital very expensive. She interrupted. I scared to ask you for more money. I use my own savings too. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, so I did. But late that night, lying in bed next to her, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when I'd become the kind of man who ignored his own instincts. The dragon tattoo on her arm seemed to be watching me in the darkness, and for the first time it didn't look beautiful. It looked hungry. I started noticing things I'd trained myself to ignore. The expensive shoes that appeared in her closet. The new iPhone she claimed a friend had given her. The way she'd angle her body away from me when texting, like she was protecting secrets. Gentana, we need to talk about money? I said one evening after finding another unexplained withdrawal on our statement. She was painting her nails on the balcony, the red polish bright as blood in the fading light. What about money? She asked without looking up. There's £1,500 missing from our account. Now she looked at me, and her eyes were cold. Missing? It's my money too, Lionel. We share account. I know, but you didn't tell me you were taking it. What was it for? She stood up, her chair scraping against the concrete. You think I steal from you? You think because I'm Thai girl, I'm prostitute? I'm thief? No, that's not. That's exactly what you think. She was shouting now, tears streaming down her face. All farang same. Give Thai girl money, then treat her like whore when she spend it. I felt like I'd been slapped. This wasn't how I'd meant the conversation to go. Gentana, please. I just want to understand. Understand what? That I buy food for my family? That I pay for medicine? That I try to be good daughter while foreign boyfriend accuse me of stealing? She stormed inside, leaving me alone on the balcony. I sat there for an hour watching the city lights flicker below. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe cultural differences were bigger than I'd thought. When I went inside, she was in bed with her back to me, shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, I whispered, sliding in beside her. I didn't mean to hurt you. She turned in my arms and her face was puffy from crying. I love you, Lionel. But you don't trust me. How we build future with no trust. I do trust you, I said, even as the words felt heavy on my tongue. I'll transfer more money tomorrow. For your family. She kissed me then, desperate and grateful. You good man. Best man I ever know. But the next day, while she was at work, I found receipts hidden in her jewelry box. Designer handbags, expensive dinners at hotels I'd never been to, gold jewelry I'd never seen her wear. Each receipt was dated during times she claimed to be working or with family. My hands were shaking as I put everything back exactly where I'd found it. That evening, she was extra affectionate. She made my favorite curry and suggested we watch a movie together. During the film, her phone rang. She glanced at it and declined the call. It rang again. Sorry, I take this. Work problem. She went to the balcony and spoke in rapid Thai. I couldn't understand most of it, but I caught a few words I'd learned. Money. Tomorrow. Farang. When she came back, she was smiling, but it looked painted on. Everything okay? I asked. Yes, just crit. Customer complain about tattoo. I help him handle. But I'd seen Crit's name on her phone. The caller ID had said Naran. I didn't say anything. I was becoming an expert at swallowing words. That night, she made love to me with desperate intensity, whispering things in Thai I couldn't understand. Afterward, as she slept in my arms, I stared at her dragon tattoo and wondered how long I'd been in its coils. The truth was circling me like a vulture, and I was running out of places to hide from it. I couldn't take it anymore. The lies, the missing money, the phone calls in Thai that always ended when I entered the room. I had to know the truth, even if it killed me. 3 days later, she said she was working late at the tattoo shop. Big customer, she explained, kissing my cheek. I'd be home midnight, maybe later. After she left, I waited 30 minutes, then followed her. My hands were shaking as I drove the rented motorbike through Pattaya's neon-lit streets. The tattoo shop was dark when I arrived, closed. My heart hammered against my ribs as I parked across the street and waited. At 8 o'clock, I saw her. She walked out of a restaurant with a man I'd never seen before. Thai, well-dressed, about my age. He had his arm around her waist, and she was laughing at something he'd said, the same laugh that had made me fall in love with her. They walked to his car, a new BMW. He opened her door like a gentleman, like he'd done it 100 times before. I followed them to a hotel. Not a cheap place, but one of those luxury resorts where rooms cost more than most Thais make in a month. I watched them walk into the lobby together, her hand in his. I sat in the parking lot for 2 hours, my whole world crumbling around me. When they came out, she was adjusting her dress. He kissed her goodbye and handed her an envelope. Money. I drove home in a daze, my vision blurring from tears or rage or both. She came home at 1 a.m, smelling like expensive cologne and lies. How was work? I asked from the bed. Busy night. Big customer, very difficult. She disappeared into the bathroom, and I heard the shower running for 20 minutes. When she came to bed, she curled up next to me like nothing had happened. I missed you, she whispered against my neck. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, my heart breaking with each breath. The next morning I confronted her. I had to. The words poured out of me like poison I'd been holding in too long. "I saw you last night," I said as she made coffee. "With the man, at the hotel." She froze, the coffee mug suspended halfway to her lips. Then she set it down carefully and turned to face me. "What man? Don't lie to me anymore, Gentana. Please. I can't take any more lies." Her face went through a dozen emotions in seconds. Surprise, anger, calculation, and finally, tears. "That's my stepbrother," she said, and the words came out too quickly. "He visit from Bangkok. I not tell you because you jealous man." "Your stepbrother took you to a hotel?" "He stay there. We have dinner, talk about family business." "He gave you money. For mama's medicine." "I told you, she's sick." But even as she said it, I could see she knew I didn't believe her. The lies were getting too heavy for both of us to carry. "Lionel, you have to trust me," she said, moving closer. "If you don't trust me, we have nothing." I looked at her face, still beautiful, still capable of making my chest tight with wanting. The rational part of my brain was screaming that this was over, that I needed to run. But the part of me that had been lonely for too long, the part that had invested everything in this fantasy, wasn't ready to let go. "I want to trust you," I said finally. "But you have to help me." She threw her arms around me and I felt her tears on my shoulder. "I love you so much," she whispered. "Only you. You have to believe me." I held her close, breathing in her jasmine scent, and tried to believe that love could conquer the evidence of my own eyes. But deep down, I knew I was just postponing the inevitable. The dragon wasn't done with me yet. I was drowning, so I decided to dive deeper. That's the only way I can explain what happened next. After catching her with another man, after seeing the receipts, after all the lies, I bought a ring. 2 carats, white gold, 23,000 bought from a jewelry shop on Beach Road. The saleswoman smiled at me like I was the luckiest man alive. I felt like the stupidest. "You sure about this, sir?" the jeweler asked as I counted out the cash. "Thai gold better for Thai lady. This very expensive." "She's worth it," I said, and part of me still believed it. I planned it for a week. Dinner at the same restaurant where we'd had our first real date, a table on the beach with candles and flowers. When Gentana arrived, she looked stunning in a red dress I'd never seen before. Another mystery purchase, probably. "What special occasion?" she asked, sliding into her chair. "Do I need a reason to treat the woman I love?" She smiled, but something flickered in her eyes. Nervousness? Guilt? I couldn't tell anymore. I was losing my ability to read her, or maybe I'd never had it. We ate pad thai and drank wine while the waves crashed nearby. I tried to enjoy it, to pretend this was just a romantic evening between two people in love, but my hand kept going to the ring box in my pocket, and my stomach churned with each passing minute. "Lionel, you okay? You very quiet tonight." "I'm fine. Just thinking." "About what?" I looked at her across the table, candlelight dancing on her face, and saw both the woman I'd fallen for and the stranger who'd been lying to me for months. About us. About the future. She reached across and took my hand. What kind of future? This was it. The moment of no return. I pulled out the ring box and set it on the table between us. Her eyes went wide, and for a second she looked genuinely shocked. Then something else crossed her face. Relief? Satisfaction? Victory? "Gentana," I said, my voice barely steady. "Will you marry me?" She stared at the ring for a long moment. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "Finally," she whispered. Not yes. Not "I love you." Finally. Like I'd kept her waiting. Like this was something she'd been expecting, planning for, working toward. But she slipped the ring on her finger and leaned across to kiss me, and I told myself I'd misheard. "Yes, Lionel. Yes, yes, yes. I marry you." The other diners clapped. The waiters brought complimentary champagne. Everyone was happy for us. The lucky farang and his beautiful Thai bride. I should have been the happiest man in Thailand. Instead, I felt like I was watching someone else's life. 2 weeks later, we were married at the district office. A quick ceremony with 2 witnesses pulled in from the street. Gentana wore white, and I wore the best shirt I had. She cried during the vows, and I convinced myself they were tears of joy. After we signed the papers, she kissed me and said, "Now I'm Mrs. Gentana Davies. Sounds good, yes?" "It sounds perfect," I lied. The first thing she wanted to do as my wife was add her name to more of my accounts. "Make everything official," she explained. "In Thailand, wife must be on everything for legal protection." I signed the papers. What else was I going to do? She was my wife now. But that night, as she slept beside me with her new ring catching moonlight from the window, I lay awake and wondered what I'd really signed. A marriage certificate or my own death warrant? The dragon on her arm seemed to be smirking in the darkness. And for the first time, I wondered if the tattoo was really new, or if she'd had it all along just waiting for the right fool to come along and admire it. I should have known something was wrong when she started being nice to me again. For 3 days after our wedding, Gentana was the woman I'd fallen in love with. Cooking my favorite meals, laughing at my jokes, making love like we were still in our honeymoon period. She even suggested we take photos for Facebook, updating her status to married with a string of heart emojis. "I want whole world to know I'm Mrs. Davies," she said, snuggling against my chest. I should have realized she was saying goodbye. On Thursday morning, she kissed me before I was fully awake. "I go to work early today," she whispered. "Big group booking. Tourists want matching tattoos." I mumbled something about having lunch together and fell back asleep. When I woke up properly at 9, the apartment felt different, quieter, emptier. I couldn't put my finger on it until I went to the bathroom and saw her toothbrush was gone. Then I checked the bedroom. Her clothes were missing. Not all of them. She'd left enough to make it look like she was coming back. But her favorite dress was gone, the gold necklace her grandmother had given her, the little Buddha statue, the expensive shoes I'd bought her last month. My hands were shaking as I called her phone. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. I threw on clothes and rode to the tattoo shop, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might crash the bike. Crit was there, working on a customer's sleeve. "Where's Gentana?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable, not meeting my eyes. "She not work here anymore." "What do you mean she doesn't work here anymore? She was here yesterday." "She quit," said she, moving to Bangkok. "When is she coming back?" He shrugged and turned back to his customer. "Maybe never. Thai girls, you know, they change mind." I rode home in a panic, calling her phone over and over. Nothing. I tried Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, even email. All of it bounced back or disappeared into the void. That evening, I went to the ATM to get cash for dinner. The machine asked for my PIN, processed for a moment, then displayed a balance that made my knees buckle. 300 pounds. Out of 30,000. I tried another machine, thinking there was some mistake. Same balance. The joint account we'd opened together, the one I'd trusted her with, was essentially empty. I stumbled back to the apartment and searched through her remaining things, looking for clues, for explanations, for anything that might tell me where she'd gone. In the bathroom, I found a pregnancy test box. Used. The stick was gone, but the box was there like a cruel joke. Had she been pregnant? Was that why she'd married me? Or was it just another prop in whatever game she'd been playing? I called the bank. They confirmed what I already knew. Multiple large withdrawals over the past week, all authorized by my wife. All legal. All devastating. "Sir, these transactions were made with proper identification and signatures. Is there a problem?" "My wife left me," I said into the phone. "She took everything." "I'm sorry to hear that, sir." But the account was joint. She had every legal right to make these withdrawals. I hung up and sat in our empty apartment, surrounded by the life we'd built together. Except it had all been fake. The marriage, the love, the future we'd planned, all of it had been an elaborate con, and I'd been the perfect mark. Too lonely, too desperate, too stupid to see what was happening until it was over. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for everything. You are a good man. Find someone who deserve you, Jay." I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then I threw the phone against the wall and watched it shatter, just like everything else in my life. That night, I slept alone in our bed, surrounded by the faint smell of her jasmine perfume. When I woke up, even that was gone. All that remained was the truth I'd been running from for months. I'd married a stranger, and she'd robbed me blind with a smile on her face and my ring on her finger. I spent 3 days in the apartment, surviving on instant noodles and self-pity. On the 4th day, I forced myself to go outside. The heat hit me like a punishment, and the familiar sights of Pattaya looked different now. The neon seemed garish, the tourists looked foolish, and every Thai woman I saw reminded me of my own stupidity. I ended up at a bar I'd never been to before, one of those places where old Western men drink away their disappointments. It was barely noon, but the place was already half full. I ordered a beer and tried to disappear into the darkness. "You look like shit, mate." The voice had a Swedish accent. I looked up to see a man about my age, weathered and tired, sitting at the next bar stool. "Thanks," I muttered. "That makes me feel better. Let me guess. Thai girlfriend problems?" I almost laughed at how obvious I must have looked. Wife, actually. Ex-wife, I guess. "Ah, you got married. That was your first mistake." He introduced himself as Lars, and within an hour I'd told him everything. The whirlwind romance, the joint bank account, the mysterious disappearances, the morning I woke up to find her gone. He listened without judgment, nodding in all the right places. "What did she look like?" he asked when I finished. I described Gentana long black hair, the honey-colored eyes, the dragon tattoo wrapping around her left arm. Lars went very still. What was her name? Gentana. Why? He pulled out his phone and scrolled through photos. Then he turned the screen toward me. "This Gentana?" My blood turned to ice. It was her. Exact same face, same smile, same tattoo. But in this photo, she was wearing a wedding dress and standing next to Lars. "When was this taken?" I whispered. 6 months ago. We were married for 4 months before she disappeared. Cleaned out our joint account and vanished. Took me for 40,000 euros. I stared at the photo, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. She told me she'd never been married before. Said Thai men didn't understand her. Lars laughed bitterly. She told me the same thing about Swedish men. Probably tells every mark the same story about their nationality. He scrolled to more photos. Gentana at restaurants, on beaches, in bed looking sleepy and satisfied. The same woman who'd shared my bed, worn my ring, promised me forever. "How long ago did she leave you?" I asked. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. She'd left Lars and immediately found me. I'd been her next target while she was still married to someone else. "Jesus Christ," I muttered. "How many of us are there?" I've been asking around since she left. Found at least 2 others. German guy named Klaus, Australian called Trevor. Same story every time. Met her at the tattoo shop, whirlwind romance, marriage, cleaned out bank account. Lars ordered another round and pulled up Facebook on his phone. "Look at this." He showed me Gentana's profile. Her relationship status was single, and there were recent photos of her in Bangkok, wearing clothes I'd never seen before. In one picture, she was at a fancy restaurant with a new man. Older, white, expensive watch on his wrist. "Poor bastard," Lars said. "Probably thinks he's the luckiest man in Thailand right now." I studied the man's face, trying to memorize it. Maybe I could warn him somehow, save him from the same fate. But who would believe me? If someone had tried to warn me about Gentana, would I have listened? The worst part, Lars continued, is how good she was at it. I genuinely believed she loved me. Every lie felt like the truth when it came out of her mouth. She called me her lucky farang, I said quietly. She probably called you the same thing. Word for word. We drank in silence for a while, two broken men united by the same beautiful lie. Finally, Lars clapped me on the shoulder. Come on, mate, let's get out of here. This place is depressing. We walked out into the blazing afternoon sun, and I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, that would take much longer, but less alone. I wasn't just a fool. I was one of many fools, victims of a woman who'd turned heartbreak into a profession. One more question, I said as we reached the street. The dragon tattoo, how long did she say she'd had it? Lars smiled grimly. Said she got it to celebrate meeting me. Fresh ink for a fresh start. She told me the same thing. We looked at each other and started laughing. Not happy laughter, but the kind that comes when the pain is so absurd you can't cry anymore. Somewhere in Bangkok, Gentana was probably telling another lonely man about her brand new dragon tattoo, how it represented the new chapter he'd brought to her life. And he was probably believing every word, just like we had. After meeting Lars, I went back to the apartment and did something I should have done months ago. I sat at the table with my sketchbook and drew Gentana's face. Not the fantasy version I'd been creating since I met her, beautiful, mysterious woman who'd chosen me above all others. This time I drew the truth. Sharp eyes calculating their next move. A smile that promised everything and delivered nothing. Hands that caressed while they reached for my wallet. I drew her dragon tattoo, but now I saw it for what it really was. Not a mythical creature of power and beauty, but a predator coiled and ready to strike. As I worked, the pieces of our relationship rearranged themselves in my mind, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. The first night we met, she'd asked if I was an artist before I'd even shown her my sketchbook. How had she known? Simple. She'd been watching me, sizing me up, looking for tells that marked me as a target. Creative types were probably her specialty. We were dreamers, romantics, easy to manipulate with stories about fresh starts and new beginnings. The phoenix tattoo she'd suggested wasn't random inspiration. It was psychological manipulation. She'd recognized a man trying to reinvent himself and fed him exactly the symbolism he needed to hear. Every conversation we'd had was a performance. When she'd told me about her difficult childhood, her sick mother, her dreams of travel, she'd been painting herself as someone worth saving, and I'd eaten it up like a man starving for purpose. The joint bank account hadn't been about building a future together. It had been about gaining access to my money legally. Everything else, the apartment, the marriage, even the sex had just been overhead costs in her business plan. I'd been a mark, not a boyfriend, a client, not a husband. The drawing took me 4 hours to complete. When I finished, I had captured something that looked like Gentana, but felt like truth. This was who she really was, stripped of the romance and illusion. A professional predator who'd perfected the art of making lonely men feel special while she dismantled their lives. I photographed the drawing and opened my laptop. For the first time since arriving in Thailand, I had something to say that mattered. I started typing an email to my old publisher in London, the one who'd rejected my superhero comics for being too unrealistic. Dear Simon, I wrote, I know it's been 2 years since we last spoke, but I have a story I think you might find interesting. It's not about superheroes saving the world. It's about real villains destroying real lives, and how one fool learned to see through the lies. I'm calling it The Girl with the Dragon Lie. It's a memoir about romance scams in Southeast Asia, told from the victim's perspective. Raw, honest, and unfortunately, very marketable given how many Western men are getting caught in these traps every year. I attached the drawing and hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I opened a new document and started writing. Not drawing this time, writing. The words poured out of me like poison I'd been holding in too long. Everything I'd experienced, everything Lars had told me, everything I'd learned about the system that had destroyed us both. By dawn, I had 12 pages of brutal honesty. The loneliness that made me vulnerable, the red flags I'd ignored, the psychology of how smart people convince themselves to believe beautiful lies. I wrote about the other victims, the network of women like Gentana who operated throughout Thailand and beyond. This wasn't just one woman's crime, it was an industry. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Simon had already responded. Lionel, this is exactly what the market needs right now. Romance scam memoirs are huge, but they're usually told by women who are catfished online. A man's perspective, especially one in Southeast Asia, would be unique. If you can give me 50,000 words of this quality, I'll give you a contract. Advance would be modest, but enough to get you back on your feet. Are you serious about this? I looked around the empty apartment, at the life I'd built on lies, at the drawing that finally told the truth. Then I typed back, dead serious. Give me 3 months. I spent the next week outlining the book. Chapter by chapter, I mapped out my descent from hopeful romantic to broken fool to enlightened survivor. I interviewed Lars and got him to share details about his experience. I researched other victims online, finding forums and support groups full of men who'd lived variations of my story. The book wouldn't just be about Gentana. It would be about all of them, the professional heartbreakers who'd turned love into a business model. And it would be about all of us, the lonely men who'd paid premium prices for discount affection. For the first time since arriving in Thailand, I felt like I had a purpose beyond my own pain. I was going to expose this world, shine a light on the darkness that had consumed me and so many others. The girl with the dragon tattoo had taken my money, but she'd given me something valuable in return without meaning to. She'd given me a story worth telling. A story that might save the next fool from making the same mistakes. Chapter 10, Broke, but finally free. 6 months later, I was living in a different Thailand, not the fantasy version I'd first fallen in love with, but the real, one complicated, beautiful, and honest in ways I was finally ready to see. I'd moved out of the apartment Gentana and I had shared, taking a small room above a noodle shop in a part of Pattaya where tourists rarely went. The rent was 8,000 baht a month, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear Mrs. Siraporn cooking downstairs at 5 every morning. But it was mine, bought with money I'd earned honestly. Teaching English to Thai students had saved me, not just financially, though the 1,500 baht per day kept me fed and housed. It gave me purpose beyond my own misery. My students were mostly teenagers from working-class families, kids who saw English as their ticket to something better. They worked harder than I'd ever worked at anything, and their determination shamed me out of my self-pity. Teacher Lionel, one of them had said after class, "You seem sad all time." Thai people have saying, "When birds sing in cage, it not because happy, it because it still have voice." Out of the mouths of 17-year-olds, the book was finished. 53,000 words of brutal honesty about love, lies, and learning to see clearly. Simon had kept his word. The advance was modest, but enough to book a flight back to Manchester and start over. The publication date was set for next spring, and early reviews from readers were calling it devastating and necessary. One reviewer wrote, "Davies doesn't just tell his story, he dissects it with surgical precision, showing how intelligent people can be systematically destroyed by those who understand their weaknesses better than they do themselves." But I wasn't ready to go back to England yet. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because I'd finally found something in Thailand that wasn't a lie. Peace. Tonight was my last night. Tomorrow I'd catch the bus to Bangkok, then the plane to Heathrow. I'd spent the day saying goodbye to my students, to Mrs. Siraporn, to the other expat teachers who'd become something like friends. Now I was walking the beach one final time, but it felt different than my first walk here with Gentana. That night, I'd been running from my old life. Tonight, I was walking toward my new one. The beach was crowded with tourists taking selfies and couples holding hands. I watched them with something like affection instead of bitterness. Most of them would go home with happy memories and funny stories. Some would find genuine love. A few would make the same mistakes I'd made, but that was their journey to take. I sat on a piece of driftwood and pulled out my phone. There was a message from Lars. He'd moved to Chiang Mai and was dating a Swedish woman who'd moved to Thailand to teach at a university. Real love this time, he'd written. I can tell because she makes me pay for my own dinner and hasn't asked to borrow money even once. I laughed and typed back, that's either true love or she's just better at long-term planning than Gentana was. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in Bangkok or Phuket, or maybe even back in Pattaya, Gentana was probably having dinner with another lonely man, telling him about her difficult past and her dreams for the future. Maybe she was showing him a fresh tattoo and calling it a symbol of their new beginning together. Part of me hoped he was smarter than I'd been. Part of me knew he probably wasn't. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd told my story, exposed the game, warned whoever was willing to listen. The rest was out of my hands. I stood up and brushed sand off my clothes. In my pocket was a boarding pass and a cashier's check knot, enough to make me rich, but enough to start over properly this time. I had a small flat waiting for me in Manchester, a publisher interested in my next book, and most importantly, I had clarity. The dragon hadn't destroyed me. It had revealed me. Stripped away all the illusions and fantasies until only the truth remained. I was 59 years old, starting over for the second time in 5 years, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Broke in some ways, rich in others, and finally, completely free. As I walked back toward town, I didn't look over my shoulder at the beach or the life I was leaving behind. There was nothing there I needed to remember. The future, uncertain as it was waiting ahead of me. And for the first time since I'd stepped off that plane in Bangkok, I was ready for whatever came next.